All right, now, everybody. Quiet, listen to me. We're going to start a show. Now, some of you people have been with me before. You know it's going to be a tough grind, but we're going to have a show.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. I'm very excited. It sounds as though you are too. I know. It is day 2 of Mark's Madness, and there is special word from the commissioner's office. That's right. Albert is here with the winners from yesterday's Mark's Madness. If you're just joining us, welcome. This is a live show. We do it from 11 to 1 in the West. We do it from 2 to 4 in the East. And all around this great globe, everyone, this great troubled earth, we welcome you. And Mark's Madness pits audio drops from our show against each other. We do it every March at the same time that March Madness is going on. We do Mark's Madness. So Mark's Madness is all the stuff that's on our show. So you will you'll pick it up as we go along, and you can vote. You don't have to be registered. You don't have to pay anything. It's kind of a fun experience for many. And it has captured the imagination of everyone who's a regular viewer, listener to this show. Kim is here.
Kim, how are you?
Albert is here.
Albert, thank you.
You are here. Let's get it on. I'm excited, Albert, to learn the results. I don't even know what they are. The results of yesterday's Mark's Madness. Can you tell me what audio drops were pitted against each other, and then what audio drops prevailed, and then I will tell everybody who's on the show today.
Of course. Yesterday we had George Santos here going against Fauci Do Not Know.
Oh, that's right. It was the Santos.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
It's George Santos here.
Yeah, and that was going up against the Fauci. You do not know what you're talking about.
You do not know what you are talking about.
So which one of those won?
Yeah, and Fauci took that one.
Fauci won it. The Fauci.
That's not fake. That's real.
Okay.
And then we had the play-in drop, the very first drops, just to make it to the tournament. Trump concepts go against shame, and Trump concepts won.
Trump concepts beat shame?
That's a shocker.
Are you kidding me?
Mm-mm.
Wow. Trump concepts of a plan. Remember, he's asked, do you have, I don't have the drop handy, sorry.
Give a plan.
But he said, I have concepts of a plan. That beat shame was the number 1 seed. It went out in the first round.
Wow.
Yeah,
This
well,
is
I
an
think
upset.
seedings have been totally questionable this year. It's just no gauge. We tried to use all new drops, and I tried to use the most recent drops as some of the higher seeds.
Some of the higher seeds. So, so shame goes down to Trump. Wow. I figured people were going to vote against Trump, but they didn't.
I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah. All right. So that's the situation with yesterday. And now we go to today. Now, today in hour 1, I believe, let me just make sure I have my my notes here. Okay. Are we ready for hour 1? We'll have 2 different audio drops going up against each other. Hour 2 will have 2 different audio drops going up against each other. So the hour 1 drops are at the ready. Here we, do I have my, what is it? It's internet. Wait a minute. I don't think I do have it, Albert. Doggone it. How could this happen? I have Girl Baby Girl. I thought I did it before we started, right?
I think I have Girl Baby Girl Don't Even Play.
You have it going deep?
I have it going all the way. I have it going all the way.
Oh, girl.
All right. I see. Okay. This is, I think this is it. So without any further delay, we'll cut this part out. Let's do it!
Mark's Madness. I can't believe it.
All right. You'll vote in the post section of our channel here on Mark's Madness for either.
Oh, girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
Or.
How does the internet work?
That's right. It has to be only one moving on to the next round. Either.
Oh, girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
Or.
How does the internet work?
It's AOC versus How Does the Internet Work? Good luck, everybody. I'm excited about March Madness like nothing else I've ever been excited about. Pretty much, I'm not excited about anything else in life.
Just March Madness.
Well, it's a depressing time in America, Kim. I can't get excited about things.
Well, it's only 4 years, right?
Oh my God, the guy's talking about another term. He's only been in power two months. There'll be no more government for the second term for him to take apart.
That's unconstitutional. You can't do that.
The Constitution, it can be ratified, it can be modified, it can be amended, it can be, there are a lot of workarounds here and there. It can be interpreted.
Right.
I mean, what's the Second Amendment? It's interpretation. What's the First Amendment? It's an interpretation. So it's constantly being interpreted. And, when you get a singular Lord and Savior type figure like Donald Trump, I say full speed ahead.
No.
Now,
stop. Turn the ship around.
I have something. I'm going to get back to that. I quickly want to tell you that I have a terrific guest coming up, bottom of this first hour. John Aravosis is a brilliant, I would say, intellect who weighs in on everything from foreign policy to domestic policy, and his experience in both is impressive. Law degree, other advanced degrees, has worked on Capitol Hill in multiple offices, has worked overseas with multiple agencies, both governmental and non, speaks 5 languages fluently. He's an extraordinary dude. And he's coming through. He has an immense following on TikTok. And we're just excited that he's going to be coming through. So John will be here bottom of this hour. And then, of course, the brilliant intellect and analyst when it comes to the law, David Katz. He is one of the best legal analysts in the English-speaking world. He joins us in the second hour. So that's just a sense of the guests that will be through. But we're going to get into some other stuff even before the guests arrive. And so,
The Mark Thompson Show.
I have a quick question. It's not related to Trump, and then I'll talk about Trump coming up on a third term. He wants to stay in power, and there are others around him, who really are in the cult, and they really want him to remain in power, and I'll get to that. Steve Bannon articulates it in just a moment. But first, I had a question about the JFK Files. The JFK Files really were nothing, right? I mean, based on what we've been able to figure out, and those who really know this territory, that is to say the JFK assassination and what other files and information has been released prior to this release, we really just didn't get any new information.
Doesn't look like it.
So, and we learn a lot of other stuff, like there are bad photocopies made of various things, like the files aren't in a kind of a coherent order that would help you get through it. There's an analog or digital fight here, meaning everything that happened with the JFK files really predated the digitization. And the digitization of things, when you put things in a digital way, it can be sometimes easier to organize them in some way. But anyway, that gets into a little bit of the weeds. So just think disorganized files, bad photocopies, stuff's kind of messed up. And it led to questions about classified files. Mostly, that there's no information. Forget about how disorganized they are. There just really is no information on the JFK assassination. So why has this stuff been classified for so long? Because we overclassify documents in this country. We just do. Government overclassifies. They tend to default to classifying things in Washington. And I thought it might be instructive just quickly to ask you in the chat who are watching live, roughly how many documents do you think are classified each year? In the United States, how many documents on an annual basis are classified? How many documents are classified each year in America? I'm taking guesses now in the chat. Of course, Trevor Starr always guesses 11,780. Now I can't. I've lost track of the. You can go ahead and put them up there because I can't.
many documents a year are classified?
Yeah, how many
From all
documents?
the different
10,000
agencies,
says
including
Nancy,
the
5
CIA.
million.
Yeah.
Including all of them, yeah.
Yeah.
Pietro says 15,000. 250 million, says Penny. Wow.
Wow. That's a lot of documents.
Guys, can we keep our guesses? I saw 50 trillion. I think that's not right. I mean, if we're not going to play the game fairly, I mean, it's just a...
Debbie says 3 million. I'll go with that.
3 million. Wildflower says 600,000. 3,600,000. 875,000 says William Lundgren. Too many, says Bald Thanos. And that's kind of my point. The actual retail price, 50 million documents are classified each year. Yeah.
That's crazy.
So, right. And this tendency to overclassify documents has gotten so bad that there have been efforts to address it at the federal level. And even during the Obama administration, he signed an executive order creating the National Declassification Center to coordinate declassification plans across various government agencies, that are really the source of all this overclassification. So that executive order also set deadlines for documents to be declassified unless they got special permission to remain classified. But there are still too many documents classified. And experts believe, I mean, when you talk to people who know this space, that the number of files that are classified are just way, way too numerous. I mean,
well, there's not going to be anybody left to write all those files anymore, so we don't have to worry about it. Yeah,
that is true.
Gone.
Certainly no one to keep
they're
track
all
of
fired.
It is true. So, yeah, thank you. Problem solved. Thank you.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Anyway, JFK is a big meh, and you're not going to find anything out from the Epstein files, and you're going to find anything out from the UFO files. So all of you who feel that your Lord and Savior Donald Trump will release everything, finally there's a guy in there who's going to do this. Biden released a bunch of this stuff, and this is basically a re-release of it, maybe with fewer redactions, but there are no bombshells in the JFK assassination files. Now, could Donald Trump serve a third term? Well, I mean, he shouldn't, by the restrictions laid down in the Constitution, be able to even run for a third term, right?
Right.
This, of course, put into effect after FDR maintained the presidency for multiple terms. So how could he achieve a third term? You'd have to get some workaround. You'd have to change things, modify the Constitution in some way. But who's even talking about him after only 2 months in office getting into the White House a third time? The answer is Steve Bannon. Albert, please share with the boys and girls Steve Bannon's musings about Donald Trump and a third term in office.
I'm a firm believer that President Trump will run and win again in 2028. So I've already endorsed President Trump. A man like this comes along once every century if we're lucky. We've got him now. He's on fire, and I'm a huge supporter. Want to see him again in 2028.
And obviously, anybody who doesn't like what you say, but judges it as a function of a lack of intelligence, doesn't know anything about you. I don't make that mistake. You're a smart guy. Oh, you know he's term limited. How do you think he gets another term?
We're working on it. I think we'll have a couple of alternatives. Let's say that. We'll see. We'll see what the definition. We'll see what the definition of term. We'll see what the definition of term limit is.
All right. Well, so you're talking about litigating this issue, because I don't want people to listen to our interview and say Bannon's cooking up an insurrection. Bannon is cooking up. You know what I mean? I want people to get a straight take on where your head is. What are you suggesting?
Chris, as you know, I've had greater long shots than this. When we supported President Trump after the election, I realize you don't believe the election in 2020 was stolen. We do. We fervently believe that. When President Trump went back to Mar-a-Lago on January 20th, 2021, he was the longest of long shots to return to the White House. We said that day in our podcast and doubled down, having President Trump's back, that he was coming back not just to win the primary, he would win the White House, and we had to get organized and drive that victory, and also start working on all the policies. What's called Project 2025 or the America First Policy Institute, but all those different think tanks that started putting in the policies that you're seeing today in what we call flood the zone or days of thunder or however you want to describe it. But this is many years in the making. So we've had greater long shots than Trump 2028, and we've got a lot of stuff we're working on there. We're not prepared to talk about it publicly, but in a couple of months, I think we will be.
But you are not suggesting revolution or overthrow or anything that people would condemn.
Chris, we just won one of the biggest sweeping victories. We're in the middle of a 1932 type realignment. If we can continue on and continue to have populist policies, populist nationalist policies, we have African American men coming to our side. We have Hispanics coming to our side. So no, we're huge believers in democracy because we know how to get votes out. We know how to get low propensity, low information voters out to support the president's policies.
He's right about that. They do know how to do that, and that's something that they did effectively.
I mean, they're trying to.
Thank you, Albert. And I've heard enough from Bannon. I think you got the essence of what he's talking about. I mean, these are guys who are taking a victory lap after only 2 months with Trump in office, and a real effort, successful in large measure, to dismantle government. So my constitution is the only constitution that matters, says Paul Thanos. Exactly. I mean, if you had a Democrat after Obama had 2 months in office showing up on a cable show like that on News Nation, Trump's health will not last 4 years, believe me, says Man from the West. Yeah, I mean, there's that too. But if you had Obama or, some, functionary or, as I say, this kind of Bannon-esque figure who is speaking for Obama after 2 months in office, talking about we're confident we want Obama to serve a third term, and we're confident that he'll just, if you had that same line being run out, you'd be vilified by the right, rightfully vilified by the right, and just torn to pieces by the media. Democrats planning to seize power for a third term. I mean, this kind of statement that he makes, I mean, you can say it's a distraction. It's not. It's what they believe. They have power, and they're going to maintain power every way they can. Look, they almost hung on to power in 2020. This is, I think, a scary time, mostly for the draconian measures that are being taken to support this group that has just come in and their politics. Look at what they're doing with the firing of inspectors general. I mean, all the cops on the beat have been fired. And so they have seized power and they want to maintain power. And at least from Bannon, you get the real plan. Bannon talked about the fact that they're flooding the zone. He talks about it here. They're just making it so difficult to even cover what's going on that it's impossible to push back. This is all part of the plan. But a third term, wow. The other big interview was one done with Elon Musk. Musk visited with Sean Hannity. I think Musk was at the White House when he was doing the interview. Not important. I'm not sure what he said. I caught bits and pieces, and I'm wondering if we can watch a little bit more now before the guest arrives. Albert, you got it ready to go? Here's Elon Musk with Sean Hannity.
AI, you are working with Neuralink so the blind can see and people with spinal cord injuries may one day walk. You help people in North Carolina. You help people in California when they have no communications. And I watch all of this, and I have to ask, why? Why do I see people like I woke up this morning and saw that Teslas were put ablaze in one of your dealerships in Vegas? I've seen this happen all over the country. Bullets are being fired. Charging stations are put ablaze. Teslas are being put ablaze. You have experienced assassination, threats of assassination for you and your family. What have you done that warrants this? Because I see nothing that you have done except help our country.
Oh, my God. Stop right there. This is the kind of, this is really why this is not an interview anymore. That you don't see interviews on Fox News Channel. These are propaganda exercises. Did you hear that ramp up?
Well, what's interesting is every single question he asks is, "You're so great. You've done so many things for America. Why don't people like you? You're getting rid of fraud, waste, and abuse. You're helping us so much. Why is there a backlash against you, Musk?" Every question is like that. It's the biggest ass kissing you've ever seen.
Well, and Musk as the victim. You know, he's the victim of the left, of the media, of the inability to understand how he's helping us. This is a guy who has taken a bunch of 18 to 26-year-olds into government, and from day one has dismantled government, has jacked private information that belonged to Americans and still has it, and has gone from agency to agency jacking that information. He is not an official member of this government in any way that leaves him accountable. He is just a bro of the president as a result of having bought the presidency for Donald Trump effectively, using the money effectively for outreach. But it was an insane amount of money, and he now assumes this role as sort of a co-president to Donald Trump. I mean, he is laying waste to the U.S. government so wantonly, so recklessly, that he's had to recall a bunch of people that were fired in the first few weeks. It's, you know, you can talk about Neuralink, and by the way, Neuralink isn't all great. Neuralink's involved in some of the most heinous animal abuse that you could ever imagine. What they do, cutting the skulls of these creatures open while they're still on minimal pain medication, and then they have to, without pain medication, they have to continue in the skull of the animal. Do you know why? Because they have to figure out what little things they do neurologically with their technology that produces some kind of effect in the animal. So you can't have the animal sedated. You have to have the animal all there. It's disgusting. It's grotesque. So don't tell me about how Neuralink is allowing the blind to see. You have a guy who also went after government agencies that were pursuing investigations against him. That's why he started at USAID. That's why he went to the FAA. That's why he went to the EPA. That's why he went to the IRS. Each one of those agencies I just mentioned had investigations and regulatory fines levied against Elon Musk. So the ramp up is just, it's loathsome. It's so fraudulent. It's so bankrupt. All right, go ahead. I won't interrupt again. Go ahead, Albert.
It's quite a shock to me that there's this level of really hatred and violence from the left. I always thought the left, or the Democrats, were supposed to be the party of empathy, the party of caring, and yet they're burning down cars, they're firebombing dealerships, they're firing bullets into dealerships, they're just smashing up Teslas. Tesla is a peaceful company. We've never done anything harmful. I've never done anything harmful. I've only done productive things. So I think we just have a deranged. There's some kind of mental illness thing going on here, because this doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
and I think there are larger forces at work as well. I mean, I don't know who's funding it and who's coordinating it, because this is crazy. I've never seen anything like this.
You actually tweeted out, and I'll put it on.
Yeah, I have to say, and I've said it over and over, and I'll just reiterate it. I said it when they first set fire to some Tesla charging stations. I don't approve of this. I don't approve of setting fire to the dealerships. I don't approve, of course, of shooting into some dealership. I don't approve of anything of this sort, this kind of violence and mayhem associated with protest. I do not approve of it on any level. So I want to be clear about that. As much as I find him to be a loathsome figure, a reckless, toxic figure within the conversation around government and what he's done, I mean, I think it's absolutely inexcusable what this guy's done to government. The kind of wanton dismissal of valuable members of the U.S. government to the point that you've had to go back and get them, rehire them, if you can even reach them. I think that is deplorable and extraordinary in how grotesque it is. But I don't approve of the violence. I just don't. Depressed Canadian, fascists will always play the victims. They will target the innocent and powerless and cry victimhood the second there's any pushback. A shameless and constant sense of aggrievement. Yeah, I mean, I think that's true, and it was also a policy or a strategy of Donald Trump, right? They've weaponized the legal system. I'm being persecuted, right? That was his thing. So the last thing I'll just say, because it was on the Hannity show, they have this incredible propaganda machine. And so when he goes on to Fox News Channel, he has somebody helping him to play the victim. In other words, he doesn't have to say it. Hannity says it, right? You've done so much. Neuralink helping the blind to see. X, the SpaceX program. Without you, we couldn't have rescued those astronauts. Okay. There are also incredible fines. That's why he went after the EPA, because of his SpaceX rockets. And he went after the FAA, he went after the EPA, both because of fines and investigations associated with the rockets blowing up and having to reroute aircraft in the U.S., and also the destruction of fragile habitats as a result of the toxic fallout from those spacecrafts that they had to blow up. So, I mean, there's a lot more to Elon Musk and to these various programs than is being represented on Fox News Channel. Anyway, yeah, only done productive things, as Brandon says.
That's it.
That's it.
Just doing the good things for America, Mark.
Yeah, there's that. All right, I have a guest waiting, so I don't want to linger any longer, but I did think that was extraordinary. Those two things, between Bannon and Musk, you had more than your daily dose of despicable. So there it is.
The Mark Thompson Show.
We do have Mark's Madness underway. If you haven't, you can still vote in the posts section of our channel. So check it out. Very excited about John Aravosis. He is a brilliant guy with an extraordinary resume that involved a government service domestically, overseas, also working outside of government. He's been a political strategist. He speaks 5 languages fluently, and he can speak about both domestic policy and foreign policy. How about it for the great John Aravosis, everybody? So cool to have you on, my friend.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're big
now,
fans.
I don't know. Now, I missed the lead-in. Did you also talk about all the Cybertrucks just being recalled?
Oh, that's right. No, I didn't. Thank you for mentioning that. Yes.
It literally just crossed the Wall Street Journal just reported, crossed my email. Nearly every Cybertruck just got recalled because it's got some panel problem that falls off.
Yeah, it's got a panel problem. The panels are falling off of the thing like crazy. It's, oh, man.
They have destroyed. I mean, again, like you said, the violence is wrong, obviously, but they have destroyed that company. It is shocking to me. I had test driven one of those like 10 years ago. It was amazing. Of course, I didn't know it fell apart, but they've just. No, but I mean, I wouldn't be caught dead in that thing now. And I thought they were the coolest thing 10 years ago.
Oh, well, they were the coolest thing 10 years ago, and the cars are really good. I mean, look, give the devil his due in the early going. He made electric cars cool, okay? Yep. And there's a computerized, and I've had 3 of them, so I really have loved the car. Now. I'm with you. I'm getting rid of. I have a Tesla that leases up in like 6 weeks or 2 months, and I'm getting rid of it. Of course,
it's embarrassing. It's not even like, oh, don't buy Domino's pizza. I'd be embarrassed being seen in the thing. That's how much they've destroyed the brand. I mean, you know that, but
yeah, but it's worth and it's instructive because it's worth noting that it was a lib kind of associated brand. You know, it was the progressives and the Democrats and the libs that were really supporting that company domestically.
Who buys electric cars? We do. I mean, that's the funniest thing. They've destroyed the brand with the actual people who buy it. You know, they're trying to get Republicans to buy it. They don't want to buy they want to buy a gas guzzler.
That's exactly right. Although, now you've got, the Republican in chief saying, buy Tesla. I just bought one. And yeah, who knows? But it's interesting because that coexists with, of course, rolling back, which they're doing. I was just reading a piece this week about that. They're rolling back all the incentives at the federal level for electric vehicles. So this is a weird kind of cognitive dissonance, Yeah.
Oh, well, I mean, Elon made his bed. I mean, again, everything going, whatever. I get so upset about it. And for him to sit there and say, I haven't killed anybody, nobody's died. They've literally got the names of people who have died as a result of his foreign aid cutoff, for starters.
Exactly.
They cut off food to dying children. They cut off AIDS medicine to hundreds of thousands of people who are going to now get full-blown AIDS because of this. I mean, it's the lies, just the gaslighting. It's
extraordinary. I mean, look, it used to be in politics that there was always a degree of spin. There were always misrepresentation. There were even lies. I mean, but now it's just, I default to whatever these guys are saying isn't true at all. I go to that place because it's borne out over and over and over that whatever they're saying is not true at all. I mean,
well, and with Trump, granted, with Trump, we always knew that, right? What is still shocking to, well, obviously what's shocking is people voted for him again, obviously, but I don't know to what degree we can tell what his voters really think. I mean, we see the crazies, and online we only hear from the crazies, right? And I don't know whether like normal Americans who maybe voted for him but aren't insane, if there is that category, whether they look at any of this and go, maybe some of this isn't, like, getting rid of the Department of Education sounds a little creepy, doesn't it? You wonder. I just don't know.
What is there buyer's remorse is what you're saying, right?
Or the beginnings of it, at least a little bit. Is there any doubt?
Yeah.
I want a scintilla of doubt. I don't want remorse because I don't think we're getting that. But do they even ever sit there and go, like with Donald Trump, do they ever sit there and go, I don't know, 34 felonies, maybe that's not fabulous. Paying off a porn star you slept with when your wife just had her baby, maybe that's okay, not good.
I mean, the vote that came out for him, I feel, might have been kind of the bro vote a little bit. Certainly a lot of the podcasts he achieved, I'd say kind of a critical mass to getting people out off the couch who probably don't vote in elections typically. Yeah. And so that crew probably isn't moved by the felony thing. I always felt like the Democrats, it's interesting, John, that you mentioned it. Just as an aside, I'll say, they made a big thing out about the felony because it matters to us.
Right.
But I think that those who kind of look at it, but what was it a felony for? I mean, some business thing, paying off some, woman he rolled around with. I get it.
Stealing classified information, trying to overthrow the government. I mean, I'm with you, but they will. What worries me is they will always rationalize it. They're not rationalizing it because it was Stormy Daniels and is an affair really such a big deal. Then we had him trying to violently overthrow the government. Somehow then that became not a big deal. I mean, I think what he said about killing somebody on Fifth Avenue, he'd get away with it, whatever that quote was. That's what worries me, is that we're into full-blown sort of cult territory where there's just no criticism. I can look at Bill Clinton and tell you, I love Bill Clinton. I thought he was an amazing president, clearly a flawed man. You won't hear that from them about Trump.
Yeah, all they'll say is, I wish he didn't tweet as much, they used to say, right? And you're right. That was a deal buster for me. Like, how do you even get past the insurrection? How do you even get past anything else? I don't understand it. Guy had fake electors, John. It was a full scheme, you know.
I have to let my dog in and out while the show's going on, just so you know. That's why you'll see me leaning over and coming back.
That's all right. That's fine. Thank you, Albert. That's a picture of Trump with an executive order. By the way, I just noticed this for the very first time. That may be the biggest signature in the history of the office of the presidency.
I think it's gotten bigger, actually. I don't think they were as big before. Now he's,
that's a pretty big one. One of the things I love all of your stuff, and one of the things I love is that you kind of weigh in on foreign policy in a pretty substantial way as well. And you do have knowledge in that area. I wonder if you can give me just a sense of how you see this changing world. I see all of these alliances, and I see much of what's happening in the world with a certain fragility that obviously these guys who are now in power in the U.S. don't see. I mean, they just come in like a wrecking crew and pivot. This is, I think, a scary time as a result. But I wonder if you can give me your thoughts on what's happening.
ironically, Trump and his people like to talk about, oh my God, World War III, the world's going to end with Ukraine and we've got to stop all this, right? They have made the world more dangerous. Trump is basically destroying NATO. I mean, I've told people on my show, because we get a lot of Europeans, especially, I'd say a lot of maybe 25% Europeans who weigh in, and they ask me, do you really think Trump would, blow us off, not help us if Russia invades? And I'm like, of course he wouldn't help you. And to the Canadians, of course he's going to invade. I mean, sure, it's possible Trump doesn't invade Canada. It's just as likely he crosses the border and grabs a little bit of land just to be a jerk. He has destroyed our side of the, world order or whatever you want to call it. The good guys don't exist anymore. The good guys have certainly been weakened. We are with the bad guys. What message does that send to the Russians? It tells the Russians, you know what? In a few years, you might want to grab the rest of Ukraine. You also may want to go after Poland and Lithuania and Latvia. Just grab a little bit. Don't grab the whole country. Grab a little sliver if you want it, right? And Trump will say, well, is it really that bad? If you're Chinese and you're China looking at Taiwan, you go, you know what? The Americans and the Europeans, they're not so together anymore, right? Do we really think, okay, Trump and the Republicans claim they'll go to war over Taiwan. Will the Europeans go to war over Taiwan? Really? Will they help us? Really? Now? I mean, that is what is so scary is, the forces of evil in the world, and I'll use the word, but China, Iran, Russia, they see that the opposition is now fractured and the opposition is missing its key player, which is Trump. And if anything, when you're doing the calculus in your head, whether you're Russia, China, or Iran, about going to war or doing something outrageous, you do a risk-benefit analysis and you say, you know what? It just got a little more benefit because the U.S. probably isn't going to be a player anymore. That makes you more likely to do bad things internationally. So it very much scares me, and it basically means we're at a little more risk of international conflict now. It's
and you
really
even hear a lot of these nations nuking up now. They're talking about,
and frankly, they should.
Sure, of
course.
No,
but I mean, I hate to say it. I mean, you say sure, but you know what I mean. Like, of course, we don't want nukes spreading all over the world, but you absolutely should get them now, right?
When you and I were kids, there was this move to disarmament, and those who ascended to power and talked about the disarmament that even the U.S. would participate in conjunction with the Russians, that was celebrated. That the idea that the world could destroy itself in a matter of minutes because of all of these nukes, that nuclear proliferation was viewed as a huge, huge burden. I mean, we all lived it as kids, and we celebrated when these disarmament treaties were actually signed. Now I see kind of what you're talking about, which is, these countries feel like, hey, America's not going to be there for us, so we need to nuke up. And it's a scary time again.
Start with Europe. If you're Europe right now, and the Poles have already now talked about nuclear weapons, at least getting some French nuclear weapons, which now it looks like maybe the French in 10 years said they may fly fighter jets that have nukes on them, 10 years from now. But if you're a European country looking at Russia expanding, especially Poland, which is right on the border more or less with Russia, you're going to say the lesson of Ukraine is if you have nukes, you can get away with murder. Russia did, and even Biden loved Biden, but he caved to Putin way too much, along with the French and the Germans. They caved too at the beginning of the war, and Ukraine gave up its nukes 20 years ago. Had Ukraine not given up, actually 30 years ago, had they not given up their nukes, it would have been much less likely Russia would have invaded. So A, if you have nukes, you get away with murder. B, if you have nukes, it's much less likely the big guy is going to come after you. I'm sorry, but to the entire war, and I'm sorry, lesson 3. Ukraine gave up its nukes. We promised to defend them, and we really didn't.
That's
Russia
the
invaded.
point. Yeah.
So if you're Iran, do you really want to give up your quest to get nukes? If you've got nukes, do you want to give them up? Hell no.
Sure.
This is a disaster worldwide.
Yeah, right. And I love that you note that the agreement that was made that you give up your nukes, Ukraine, and we'll take care of you. It's a security agreement. But again, sort of the word of the U.S. is not worth much, as we learn.
No. And again, even now that was Bill Clinton and the invasion initially happened under Obama, but now you've got Trump taking it to an nth degree worse, obviously, with the commitment to NATO. We're threatening war with Denmark, NATO ally, Greenland, NATO ally, Canada, NATO ally. I mean, they think this, I think what is really troubling for me too is they think this is all funny. I think when we talk about this, the Republicans, the MAGA people go, hey, look at the libs all upset about the world order. This isn't funny talking about invading our neighbors. This isn't funny sucking up to our enemies. I mean, I was a Republican like 30 years ago. I did foreign policy for a Republican in the Senate, actually. It shocks me the most to see Republicans go bad on foreign policy, because I would have thought that's one issue, right? Standing up to America's enemies and defending our troops is one issue Republicans are never going to go back on. And they elect a draft dodger who has repeatedly made fun of the military, called them suckers and losers, and now is saddling up to our enemies. And we all go, la, 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 I guess that's okay now. Hating them. It's almost like they're the far left. They're the stereotype of the far left that we've had to deal with for decades. Oh, you hate America. You hate defending America. You hate the troops, and you love our enemies. Guess who that is now? It's the mainstream Republican Party.
And most of that, wouldn't you say, John, or much of that is because they're scared. They're scared of Trump and Musk on a political level, primarying them, that is, targeting them.
Yeah.
And I think they're also scared. There's a sense of, if you're called out by Trump as an enemy or a problem, within the party, that there's even a kind of physical fear. I mean, Romney talked about it for him and his family,
You know, it's funny. You remind me of a story of an aunt in Greece. I mean, she's passed away now, but years ago, an uncle of mine was like the Greek defense minister, all these other jobs, very important in the 1980s under the socialist government. And it's his wife, lovely woman at the time. I met her in the early 90s. I'd never met her. And we were talking about Hillary Clinton and how she went up to Hillary Clinton once at the women's conference in Beijing, 96, maybe something like that, 1996. And she goes, I went up to her and I said, how could you stay with that man after everything he did? And I said, you did not. She goes, of course I did. And I tried to explain, this is relevant for Trump and the Republicans. I tried to explain, I said, look, but she went through her life supporting this man. She got him into office. She's the one who put him in the White House, basically. And she has a career of her own she wants, and she wants his support. If she divorces him, she loses that after everything she's invested. And she deserves to now get her chance, right? And she looked at me and she said, John, your self-respect is more important than a job. And it's what I think about today when I think about the Republican Party. And yeah, they're scared of Trump. Yeah, he's going to go after your job. Oh, poor people, right? Maybe then you shouldn't be in the job if you're a Republican and you're willing to give up on national defense of all things and the Constitution. I mean, like religion. I mean, supposedly they cared about family values. Literally nothing other than guns, there's like nothing they claim to care about they still do. And so I get upset. I mean, I get it. And I agree that they're afraid of Trump. But my God, were they all such wimps, every single one of them, and so craven that none of them sat there and said, other than a couple that have resigned, basically like Kinzinger and some.
Well, look what they did to Kinzinger. I mean, they've vilified Kinzinger. They've made him a poster child for a traitor.
Yeah, but having said that, what's the worst thing that happened to Kinzinger? He lost his job. I mean, what they did to Adam was horrible. I love Adam Kinzinger. I don't agree with him on much, but right.
I'm with you on that.
But as far as defending the constitutional order and our freedom, I think the guy's great. But what did they do to him? He lost his job. He's fine. He's not even, I mean, there is something very craven about the fact that the Republicans, the MAGA people are scary, but literally you're talking about losing a job. And you thought, you know what? I guess I'll cave on defending my country because I don't want to lose my job. Oh, poor baby. I'm really shocked as to how much Republicans don't believe in the values. I don't want to sound naive here, but I really thought they believed this crap.
I don't know, John. I'm surprised that you're surprised, because I think that, you've worked around these people so closely.
But I thought they believed the freedom stuff and the religion stuff. No, that's what I'm saying. Like the family, I didn't think the family value stuff was a lie. It was horrible, but I thought they believed it. And then you look at Trump and they go, I guess we don't care about the religion and the family values anymore. Okay.
I mean, hypocrisy has never sort of risen to the level it's risen in the GOP. It's extraordinary. I mean, and it goes to policy as well on the Supreme Court appointment. We can't vote. Remember what they did to Obama with the open seat on the Supreme Court, and then when Trump has the seat, we get the appointment within a month of him leaving office.
But you know what, too? They fight a lot harder than we do, though. I mean, even what McConnell did, stealing the Supreme Court seat, I don't want to say we should steal things back, but we are not stealed enough, right? I've always complained that Democrats kind of suck at messaging. And even right now, right? I'm not sure what Democrats should do in Congress to some degree, because I mean, what power do we have to stop Trump? But having said that, we all kind of have this gut feeling that they're kind of helpless right now and not sure what to even do is what it feels like. And Republicans, do you think Republicans right now, if the shoe was on the other foot, would go, oh gosh, we're so scared, we don't know what to do? The Republicans would be like, what? Tasmanian devils coming after us. if Obama were doing everything Trump was doing right now.
Yeah, Kim's pointing out that the Lisa Murkowski story, that, you know, Murkowski's sort of, I guess, coming forward with the idea as though, you know, how can the GOP not have, basically saying what you're saying, which is how can no one in our party step forward and say something? It's odd coming from Lisa Murkowski, who really doesn't show up except to, you know, she's the amen corner, I think, a bit.
Yeah,
with it.
I mean, she's opposed some of the. I was looking into this recently, actually, because I saw her kind of speaking out, and I was like, she opposed a number of Trump's nominees, which is good. I mean, having said that, this is kind of like the Susan Collins thing. When Lisa Murkowski is your moderate,
yeah,
you know, I mean, she's not a horrible person, I think, but she's pretty mainstream Republican. She's not a moderate. And Susan Collins isn't a moderate either, but she's all that's left.
They also, that opposition, just because we're on it, I think tends to show up when their votes aren't critical. You know, I mean,
yes.
And I think there's a little bit of that on the Democratic side, as you suggested.
Well, you get permission. I worked in the U.S. Senate. You very often get permission to vote the wrong way because they say, okay, you come to the very end, we've counted the votes, we know we've got enough votes. Susan and Lisa, the moderate Republican senators, go ahead and vote against us because it'll help you politically. And we've got more than enough votes, we can lose your vote. And they will often literally get permission. Now, John McCain didn't get permission to save Obamacare. That was legitimate. But a lot of times when they vote negative, but we lose the vote anyway, they were told they could vote with us, basically. So that it wasn't an act of courage or something that they were doing.
I mean, you mentioned messaging. We talk a lot about it on the show. I've been talking about it for years because, politics really is all messaging and sales. And Trump, he sells better than anyone. I mean, he's completely unmoored. I mean, he's not attached to any.
Well, he's a huckster. He's a huckster.
Right. Exactly.
So he's a salesman, but he's a con artist. Salesman.
Yes. Yeah. He's not right. Thank you. It's
so there's a negative spin to it. Yeah.
But we on the left, or even moderate centrist left, need to find voices that also cut through. And I just saw, I guess it's today, maybe I saw it yesterday, that AOC and Bernie are going on a tour.
Yeah.
And those do feel like two of the stars in terms. I've always felt Bernie communicates so well. I mean, and he calls out the billionaires. He speaks plain language. He speaks in a kind of angry way, the same way Trump cut through. I'm angry about this, and you should be angry about
and
this.
No
I
BS,
feel that's effective.
You hear Bernie, if Bernie's to the left of me, but I hear Bernie and I don't ever feel like I'm being spun. I don't feel like he's giving me BS, right? And AOC is, again, so far to the left of me. Again, I'm very impressed with her, though, but I'm just telling you guys my politics. But she doesn't bullshit.
Right.
I've never felt like AOC was spinning me a line. Now, I will say this. I still, again, as somebody a little, not in the middle, but I'd say in the middle of Democrats, I still worry, though, that we've got like the socialist wing that's out there representing us and railing the troops. That's great. But, I wish we could maybe get others too, but frankly, they're all we've got. They're the only two who seem to be this good.
Why is it only the socialists are the ones who can communicate? That's your frustration, John?
I mean, let's be honest. It's not just them, right? Richie, I was going to call him Cunningham. What the hell's, I know Richie Torres. Torres in New York is amazing. A Democratic congressman, Black, Latino, gay, a little more the middle for Democrats.
Right. Incredibly
well-spoken. Ruben Gallego, new senator, former congressman, Arizona, very well-spoken. We do have a number. I mean, Gavin Newsom, he's been pissing off people lately, but Newsom's very good with the messaging. Pete Buttigieg. I mean, so we do have people, honestly, even somebody like Buttigieg. I think what Bernie and AOC are doing is good because at least somebody is trying to take the lead on messaging. Buttigieg should be out there more, frankly. Because he's so good at the messaging.
Brilliant. He's brilliant.
We get occasional hits and we go, oh my God, look what Pete just did. And you share the video. No, Pete needs to be out there regularly. Now, having said that, someday he wants to run for president. So maybe he's holding back. I don't know the calculus, right? But those of our people who speak better, maybe we need to figure out how to get Richie out there more. Again, on Palestine and Israel, people will hate him on the far left. But otherwise, Richie's kind of amazing at going after Republicans.
Well, you thought you were going to get that with John Fetterman, by the way, a kind of guy who represents, he reps this everyman kind of thing in every way. He seems to be a plain speaker. Then, of course, he suffered the stroke and all this kind of thing. But and now his politics seem to be a little more confused, to be polite about it. So
I don't know with him, right? I mean, well, again, it could have been the injury. maybe at his heart, he was more a centrist. You're still getting no BS from him. He's just throwing it at us a little more. You know what I mean? Like, the straight talk we're getting is a little more at the left than the right lately, I think, from him. But I know what you mean. We were kind of hoping maybe, even the dress code with him not wearing good clothes to Congress, we thought, oh, maybe he's a little more of a hippie, but he's not a hippie.
Because there is the populist thing is the thing now, and I feel as though it's going to become more the thing. We're not going to lose that. That's my sense of things now. I think we need somebody with a connection to that populist message.
You know what's funny, though? You just got me thinking this when you said populist. But think of what Trump did. Trump took populism in the Republican Party, and he didn't quite make it. He kind of made it conservative Republicans, but not really, right? Because he's not in some ways, certainly not on defense, right? Certainly not on moral stuff. He's trans bashing, but that's about it. I mean, he's made populism this third way, to use the phrase, Republicanism, and maybe that's the way it works, right? Where we get populist, but just because you're a populist doesn't mean you're either I don't want to say far left, but whatever the word is, far right, far left, on that side of the party. Apparently, maybe we're going to shake things up too. I don't know.
I mean, it's interesting that you characterize him that way, Trump, because you're right, of course. But I also think of the way that he's wrapped himself in the flag and the Bible.
Yes.
I mean, so he really does vacuum up a lot of that crowd, that single issue voter crowd.
That's their hypocrisy and their lack of moral standing thing, right? Because for Trump to wrap himself in the flag after denigrating the troops and supporting our enemies, for Trump to wrap himself in the family values crap, when this guy, by my count, he's probably broken 9 of the 10 commandments. I have no suggestion that he's murdered anybody. I think every single other one he's done, right?
Well, John,
right?
It takes an imperfect vessel to do the Lord's perfect work.
Okay. Actually, but you're joking, but what you're sort of referring to is Trump claimed repeatedly, which your audience may remember, God saved me from the attacks last year, the assassination attempts. He wanted me to win. Yeah, sure he did, Donald. Right. It's more likely the devil wanted Trump to win. I mean, but he's able to say this stuff. And by the way, we sit back and we kind of go, ha, ha, ha. And he gets away with claiming God's mantle when this guy is the most unreligious or anti-religious person on the planet.
Yeah, it's hard to fight.
He laughs when those people do the laying of hands on him and stuff. Can you imagine what's going on in his head?
Well, he look, this is a guy who's playing president and playing it well. I think he's a generational political figure. I say it on the show occasionally, and I get blowback. In other words, I think he's a terrific salesman, huckster, con man, whatever you want to call it. So good that he's been able to sweep up this entire party and get into power. So
he won twice.
So the idea that he could stand there while people pray around him is my point. Is that's just another thing. Where do I stand? Okay, they're going to pray around me. Got it. Okay, when do we? In 3, 2, 1, and go. You know what I mean?
I'll just think about porn in my head while they're praying for me. I mean, no, but I mean, and they know it and they don't care.
Right. There's a lot about this that's about power, John. Last thing in our last minute with you, I wanted to ask you how you game out the Ukraine-Russia latest. The idea somehow that we would take ownership of some of the energy plants there, of the nuclear plant. It's all so
bizarre,
unprecedented, frankly.
Well, it's bizarre too. Like initially, Trump wanted half of Ukraine's rare earth minerals worth $500 billion or something crazy. I can see why we'd want those if you're a calloused, avarice, extortionist, sure. But now he wants, instead, we'd like some of Ukraine's power plants. That does not, if you're just looking at it from a purely, America, let's grab stuff. We're going to get Ukraine's power plants. Oh, that sounds very exciting, Donald. Thank you so much. Right. I mean, he's up to something. That's not what's actually going on. I don't know what it is. He's going to sell Ukraine out. He's on Russia's side. He's not on Ukraine's side. He's not even in the middle. He's not Switzerland. Although Switzerland's been helping too, to be honest, us. He's on Russia's side. He's going to reach a crappy deal. Ukraine doesn't have a choice. I mean, at this point, Ukraine's not going to win the war, obviously, right? I mean, I support Ukraine, but come on. He's going to make them reach a crappy deal. And in 3 to 5 to 8 years, Russia's going to invade again to finish Ukraine off. I mean, I think that's exactly, and the Ukrainians know it. And he's not going to do much to help forestall that from happening. And that's what worries me.
It's worrisome. It's
bad.
I mean, it's depressing, honestly, really depressing. Yeah. I mean, and these are free people who want to continue free, and they're going to get anything but that.
They're Europeans. They're our allies. They've also shown that they're damn good fighters. I mean, they've got a super technology infrastructure. A lot of Ukrainians are basically tech consultants internationally. I mean, a lot of stuff that we'd be like, oh, this is be interesting. And frankly, the rare earth minerals. Like, I don't object to the idea of saying, hey, maybe America get something out of this. And if America has ownership rights and things like that, the Russians might be afraid of going after it. That's interesting. Maybe we'd even go and defend those mines or whatever, right? Because we don't want the Russians getting them. I mean, strategically, I don't like the extortion aspect, but I like the idea of tying us more closely to Ukraine, right? But I don't think he's going to do any of that. He just wants it to end so he can get his Nobel Prize and make Vladimir Putin happy.
I sadly agree with you. And I too would have loved a connection between the U.S. and Ukraine that would have been independent of Russia. And that would have kept us in the peacemaker game as opposed to what we're doing now, which is
well,
just
and we'll come back in 4 years when Trump is gone. But he has so damaged America's brand. I was talking on my show last night. Nobody can trust us anymore. We are one election away. No matter who we elect president, we are one election away from screwing you over if you're an American ally.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, we talked about the Ukraine nuke and a security agreement that was made in the 90s. Yeah. And as you say, well, it was just one election. And now that's like we've forgotten. Forget about it. We're not.
There's always another Trump on the horizon now, potentially. So why should you trust America if another Biden comes in and says, don't worry, I'm with you, Europe? Yeah, and then Russia's going to invade in 5 years, and it's going to be another bad Trump, and we're not going to come defend you.
Yeah, thank you.
It's horrible to say. You cannot trust us anymore.
Yeah, we used to be sort of the North Star, I think, for much of the world, and now
actually, quick second. There's a famous quote from de Gaulle to Kennedy, I believe, with the Cuban Missile Crisis, and he was going to show de Gaulle like the satellite photos to prove what was going on, and de Gaulle responded, "No, the word of the American president is enough for me to believe."
Wow. Yeah, boy,
that
seems that seems like some kind of fairy tale book now.
You know,
John Aravosis. The show is the Aravosis Report.
Yep.
Now, just tell everybody where they can find it. I'd love to
mostly
bring people over
TikTok and YouTube. On TikTok, I'm just my last name at Aravosis. On YouTube, it's John Aravosis DC because YouTube is weird. There's no other Aravosis. It's just me, but they're weird.
That's that as well.
But I do it on both. YouTube is a little calmer. TikTok is a little more TikTok, so a little crazier. But Monday to Friday, 6 o'clock Eastern time, US, I do a nightly show on just the latest political news from Washington and then some of the international news.
We love your stuff in this house, and I look forward to more. And please come visit again.
Oh, I'd love to.
All right, we'll do it, John. We'll make a plan.
All right,
great.
Bye,
John Aravosis, everybody. So long now.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Smart guy. Love him. He is really great. If you haven't checked out his stuff, you should. Ryan with a €20 super chat says, all this talk about third terms in Canada as the 51st state are distractions designed to keep us all sputtering like a cat chasing a laser pointer. There'll be no third term, and nobody's annexing Canada. Stay focused.
Good day, sir.
All right. My God.
Is this a good time to bring up the Constitutional Congress that they are trying to bring to the Washington, D.C. area?
Yeah, thank you. Kim will explain to you how they actually are making plans for a Trump third term and for changing the Constitution.
There's an article in ProPublica, which is a site I read regularly, a news website. They have a draft version of a proposed lawsuit that's being put forward to attorneys general in several states, revealing details about who is involved in different types of arguments. And what they would like to do is apparently convene some type of gathering, and they're using you need to have 2/3 of states, which is 34 states, to request Congress to call a convention, a constitutional convention, to propose and pass amendments. And they're going back in time. And if any state has ever called for a constitutional amendment, they're saying that state has called for it, like all the way back to the 1920s. Even though it has nothing to do with 2025 or anything happening now. And so if they can get 34 states to say, yeah, we'd like a constitutional convention. They're going to bring everybody together, and there are no rules that say you have to talk about that thing which your state wanted to talk about. They can raise any issue. And as we saw in the beginning of the show, Steve Bannon talk about, well, there are ideas being floated. Well, we're working on it. That's what they're working on.
And the way that they've done this typically, and as Kim says, this is predated the Trump administration, is they've done it around the debt. So they want to pass a constitutional amendment that will not allow, to balance the budget, will not allow America to be in debt. And they've come close to that number that Kim's talking about. Was it 34?
34.
Yeah, they had 28 who signed on, states that signed on to this, but so they can't quite get to this threshold. So the idea is that, as Kim says, they ride in on whatever, it might be the debt,
Wisconsin, 1929. It was an effort to repeal prohibition.
Prohibition, thank you. So there you go.
It has nothing to do with anything, but they're going to use it. Yeah.
And it's a Trojan horse for increasing executive power and a bunch of other things that they want. It's a power grab. Okay. Not to say that the Constitution, as you know, I think it's a living, breathing document. I'm not some originalist, and you probably aren't either. I mean, things have to be changed from the original document. I think that's a healthy attitude. But the idea somehow that they're going to hold this constitutional convention and increase the executive power that's already, it seemed, overgrown, that's scary. But that's what they're talking about. So,
and once you get the constitutional convention together, you don't necessarily only have to talk about finances and the country's deficit, or balanced budget. You could then talk about perhaps a third term. You could talk about gun laws in the country. You could, convene and basically redo the entire document. And that's the problem. And that's what a lot of opponents are saying. They want to rewrite the Constitution.
Exactly.
They say, no, right. We don't want to rewrite the Constitution, but they could.
No, it's a remarkable thing. And they're being so aggressive now on so many fronts that I really love that you brought this up, because I do think this is something else they could become quite aggressive about. And it's scary, A judge has decided not to intervene in the Department of Government Efficiency's takeover of the U.S. Institute for Peace, which is a conflict prevention nonprofit organization. They have sued DOJ, has the organization, after members aided by the FBI and local police forced their way into the company's headquarters. That happened on Monday. They are an independent corporation set up by Congress, and the executive branch has no authority over them, and yet the DOJ crew barged in, essentially, as I say, with FBI and cops with them. Donald Trump will reportedly sign an executive order shutting down the Department of Education. You heard that. The White House also saying it's going to suspend $175 million in federal grants to the University of Pennsylvania for allowing trans women to compete in sports. Columbia University now has until today to make changes demanded by the government or lose $400 million in federal grants. And it is continuing that Tesla stock is worth less and less every day as it becomes sort of associated with what Elon Musk is doing. Albert, I am excited that we have moved into hour 2 of this show. And people,
The Mark Thompson Show.
We do 2 live hours every day, 2 to 4. Hour 1 and hour 2, we call them. We didn't spend a long time labeling the hours. Maybe we should have spent longer on that decision. We just decided we'd call hour 1, and hour 2. And so that's where we are. But what that's done, Albert, is that has brought us to an inflection moment, is what I like to call it. An inflection moment in Mark's madness. Do you have anything to say, Commissioner, as the Commissioner of Mark's Madness, before I kick off the hour 2 showdown, sir?
Well, the last hour, we have probably one of the favorites, and the favorites is probably AOC Baby Girl. It's very one-sided in this.
AOC Baby Girl is doing well on the.
Oh, girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
That's beating
almost
out,
90% of the vote. So.
Wow, that's beating out. How does the internet work? Wow. Well, let's see if we have a closer contest in this second hour. Let me figure out if I've even got the, I think I do have the drops ready to go. And we can get into hour 2 of Mark's Madness.
Mark's Madness.
Oh, I love it. You can only vote for one. You'll vote for either.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Oh, either the scene or you'll vote for.
My wife wants some vegetables for crudité.
Oh my gosh, it's crudité or it's the scene. So either.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Or you can vote for Dr. Oz. Dr. Oz's drop is.
My wife wants some vegetables for crudité.
I don't know. That's a tough one. I think Larry King historically has done well on this show. Dr. Oz, of course, we talked about him yesterday. He's kind of a shimmied and shammied in front of a congressional committee talking about supplements and talking about a bunch of other stuff he's done. You can
How many
vote.
combined wives between the two, though?
Oh, that's great. Yeah. They do have, they meet over wives. Larry King married 8 times. This is a good question that Michael is asking, although I don't know it's critical now. Michael D. Mark, where do I click to hear the drops? Well, Albert and I did a whole video on that. And if you want to hear all the drops, you can find that video. What's the video called?
I think it's like official 2025 Mark's Madness drops. And we have timestamps in there, so you could just scroll the bottom of YouTube and listen to said drops.
Yeah, so just find that in our channel, and you can scroll along the bottom, and you can go to the various drops. As he's chaptered them for you, has Albert. But to vote on the drop, you need to go to our channel and just go to the posts section. And in the posts section, you can vote there. Albert has it up for you people who are watching on YouTube. There it is, posts. And those listening, again, go to our channel. If you're listening on the podcast and you want to participate, don't have to participate, but it is free. You just jump on our channel and you can go to the posts section and you'll see them all. AOC crushing How Did the Internet Work in the first hour. Most people, loving the AOC.
A lot of people have AOC going very deep in the tournament.
Yeah, I don't know. But I like Larry King to win this, but I don't know. That's often the kiss of death.
What can you tell us about the scene?
What can you tell us about the scene? Dr. Oz with his crudité.
My wife wants some vegetables for crudité.
In the King household, we don't serve crudité.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Anyway, we've got David Katz coming up, and he is brilliant. We'll talk about many things that are going on with the law and beyond. Before Katz gets here, do I have time for some Kim news?
I don't know. He's probably pop up the minute I start. But I'm happy
we're
to
like
do it.
in that weird in-between time every Thursday with David Katz where we have a little time, but probably not enough time.
Not enough time to really get into it. So if that's true, then I can actually, because I've got a lot of stuff that I wanted to share. So maybe I will do that in lieu of Kim's news for now. I did have one follow-up because I danced out of the Musk stuff quickly because I had John Aravosis waiting. And the couple of things that I wanted to mention is that the Tesla brand so damaged, apparently at this point, that Tesla has been booted from the Vancouver International Auto Show. And the reason they say is because of safety concerns.
Yeah.
So they're worried about, I think they're worried about safety because of protests and that Tesla's been the target of so many protests. Isn't that right, Kim? I mean, yeah. They're concerned that their auto show is essentially going to be,
hijacked
set upon by protests, right?
As a giant Tesla protest. So they say it's about safety, but they say Tesla has been removed following multiple opportunities to voluntarily withdraw from the event. So basically, it was quit or be fired, right? Either you leave or we'll make you leave. So they say the primary concern is the safety of attendees, exhibitors, and staff. auto show it's Vancouver International Auto Show. It started Wednesday. A lot of people go to this one. Last year, 130,000 people went to this auto show, so it's a big one.
Well, when we own Vancouver soon as a 51st state, we can rework, who attends the auto show.
Of course, of course.
Everything that's happening politically couldn't have happened at a worse time for the point of view of EV adoption, said the chief analyst at the car market research firm Auto Pacific. It is very possible that the electric vehicle revolution is on shakier ground than we all think. Republican plans to scrap nearly all federal support for electric vehicles could kneecap this nascent industry. Nascent is a ding word. And auto industry experts are saying just when more Americans are considering buying an EV, and car companies are planning big investments, it may be actually going the other way because the feds are now knocking the supports out from under EV, like the EV tax credits, the tailpipe pollution rules. They're slashing funding for charging stations. All of these things are being done by this Donald Trump administration, and that would slow EV sales and trigger maybe a wave of factory shutdowns, canceled investments. This all according to those who are analysts both in the industry and who look at energy investments worldwide. So this biggest source of greenhouse pollution in the U.S. is transportation, mostly from cars and light-duty trucks. That's according to the EPA. I mean, again, get what you can from the EPA now because they're probably not going to exist in 10 days in the form that they are. But experts say switching from gas and diesel engines to electric vehicles is the best way to limit the damage from climate change as well. The tailpipe emissions and these emissions from all these vehicles are expected to make people sicker. And I view this as I'm really downcast about it because I think you can smell.
It's okay, Mark. You're not, just like you're not pregnant if you don't take a pregnancy test, you're not really sick if we get rid of medical information and, Health and Human Services, real facts. Don't worry about it. You're not really sick. It's an illusion.
Yeah. So but the fact that the feds have pulled out of this and are making aggressive moves to get out in any way of supporting electric vehicles, notwithstanding the fact that Donald Trump just did a car show on the White House driveway. The shift from gas-powered cars and trucks to EVs in the U.S. is endangered. And even without government support, though, it's worth noting, and then I'll get to David Katz, that the sales of gas-powered cars will be eaten away by electric vehicles because of the price of gasoline. EVs are breaking into the mainstream of the U.S. market in ways that would suggest that people are moving further away from these combustion engines. But the idea somehow that it was going to be fast-tracked, no. And now the support for the electronic network of power stations that you need to power these EVs, that's going away completely. So I really was excited about the move to electric vehicles, and now it just looks as though, just from the standpoint of public health, breathing this stuff in. Have you been in a parking lot with the engines running? Have you been near a freeway? Look at the statistics on families that live close to freeways and freeway congestion. The stats on childhood development, on human health, they're damning. So, but sadly, it looks as though EVs and that whole EV world is endangered by the new administration's positions on supports for electric vehicles. So, all right, we continue.
The Mark Thompson Show.
I'm excited, as are you. Thursdays bring in one of the great legal analysts in the English-speaking world. You've heard him on London radio. You've seen him on News Nation, on Fox News Channel, on Australian television, on New Zealand television. If they speak English and they've got legal questions, this is the man. We love our time with him on Thursdays. The former federal prosecutor, now a defense attorney in Southern California, David Katz, everybody.
Great to be with you.
Hello, Counselor. Nice
Great
to
to be
have
with
you on board. So there's a whole lot going on, and I want to start with the judges. The judge that interceded in the Donald Trump deportation of the Venezuelan gang members, and they might all have been gang members. Again, I'm not saying they weren't, but we didn't see that proof because of the way in which they were sequestered and then moved out of the country so quickly. So there was a restraining order, of course, issued saying, stop this deportation. It's not legal, and planes that are in the air need to turn around and come back to the U.S., and those that haven't taken off yet need to not take off. And despite all of that, planes that were in the air continued, and the plane that was still on the ground took off, and those Venezuelans were deported. The blowback on that has involved the judge who issued that order, who has said now that my order was violated, and I want an investigation with the government. I want government documents. You can fill in some of the specifics, but speaking of specifics, he asked for specifics on timing, because their original view was, hey, too late, we've already done it, wish we could have gotten this order sooner. But he is saying, I want to see specific timing, where everything was when that order was issued. Now, and this is the last part that I'm really curious about from you, that judge is being vilified, named, doxxed, and even high-profile figures on the right are calling that judge out and calling for his impeachment, namely Elon Musk and Donald Trump. Can you speak to this?
Well, this is an outrage, what they're doing to the judge. And, all of these people, supposedly in good faith, were upset about President Biden's executive orders, upset about the judicial review, making sure there was proper judicial review after there was a deliberative process, and sometimes, like the student loan forgiveness was overturned by the courts, many times 2 judges to 1, many times by a Supreme Court that has been, stacked by Trump's appointees, just crowing about how important it was that there had been observance of the rule of law, and that here was Biden trying to get away with something with one of his executive orders. And I mean, we suspected at the time that a lot of those people were hypocrites, that they were just outcome determinative, that they didn't like Biden's policies, and the rest was all rhetoric and nonsense. Well, they've certainly been shown to be utter hypocrites with this one. This was designed by Trump to get around the rule of law. This was designed to do something that was very sketchy under the law and yet get away with this. This was an authoritarian impulse, if ever there was one. As I understand it, Trump only signed the order on Friday. Now, bear in mind, all these people were in custody. This right-wing rhetoric you're hearing now, the Stephen Millers of the world, who are fulminating that, oh my God, were these people supposed to be allowed to run loose and threaten the American public? None of the people put on the plane, as I understand it, was running around threatening the American public. They were all in custody already. So Trump took these people who were in custody already and put them on these, signed the order on Friday. The order was only released on Saturday. This was some of the greatest lawyering. The public interest lawyers who represented these Venezuelan plaintiffs are to be highly commended for staying on top of this, getting a hold of that order, realizing what was going on, and running to this judge on Saturday. The administration did not expect that they would be that diligent, that professional, those pro bono lawyers. They didn't expect that this judge would say, I don't care if it's a Saturday. I'm calling all of my staff in. We're going to have a hearing. We don't have 5 days a week of justice, and on 2 days the weekend, you can do anything you want to, no matter how illegal and unconstitutional it is. So here it is, Saturday. They're having a hearing, unexpected by the administration. It appears that the administration of Trump just decided to do, Mark, whatever the hell they wanted to do. And whatever the hell they wanted to do was put these people on the planes, and no matter what the judge said, stick them on the planes and take them down to El Salvador, where they're paying $6 million of our taxpayer money so that this dictator in El Salvador can do his big show. He does his big propaganda thing because he's tough, he's dominant. Boy, he puts people in jail and makes them look terrible. You and me, Mark, They would deport us from this country. They'd put us in those white suits. They'd make us crouch in those positions. And the whole world would say, wow, do we look like some bad actors? And it would be you and me just put in those suits. We don't know anything really about these people because they've avoided due process and they've avoided finding out about these people. Well, so what actually happens, it gets worse and worse. Or in the words of Homan, this Homan, who's been given this huge power to deport people, and said, I don't care what the judges said. Now, I don't lightly compare people to early Hitler or early Stalin, but I don't think early Hitler and early Stalin or early Mussolini said, I don't care what the judges say. Mark, there's at least a fiction, there's at least a fig leaf that every one of these autocrats does care what judges say and is supposedly doing it. Somehow there's an exception to it, they're appealing it. But to say on national TV, this Homan, I don't care what the judges say, any decent administration in the history of this country would have fired him immediately. Anyway, what actually happens is that the judge is hearing this and the judge says, turn those planes around. That is an order. If the judge says to you, you're in contempt if you ask another question, and then you ask the question, you're going to be held in contempt. And when you argue, there wasn't a written order. Judge, I was waiting for the written order before I complied with what you ordered me to do in court orally. You would be laughed out of court. Every lawyer in America knows this is garbage. Any lawyer who says that this somehow is an exception, that you don't have to follow the order because it was oral and it wasn't written until an hour and a half later. And the other thing about it, it's not like it was said in the hallway. What's said in a federal court is taken down by the court reporter. There's a record of it. So any conscientious lawyer, and these lawyers who are representing the Trump administration, I'm sure they're ambitious. I'm sure they want things. Maybe they want judgeships. But they're liable to have a non-working bar card pretty soon. Because if you go to a federal hearing like that, and you know what the stakes are on a Saturday, you have the phone number and a way to contact your supervisor. And when that judge says from the bench, turn those planes around, and there was a bevy of government lawyers there for Trump, one or two of you goes outside immediately, gets on the phone and says, the judge just ordered to turn those two planes around. Anyway, it's very clear by now. There are actually flight records, but this judge wants to make a record of what happened, a formal court record. But they can actually prove, because these flight records are pretty infallible, that the planes were not turned around. One of the three planes took off even after the judge said, don't do this. This is my order. Don't do it. And so they absolutely defied a court order. This is a huge violation of our separation of powers, of the rule of law. All these Republican senators who said nothing. This is an absolute disgrace. This is the rule of law. And when a federal judge tells you to do something, Mark, you better do it. Now, they found a million reasons not to actually produce the records in court, which are going to show what it looks like is that when he said turn the planes around, one hadn't even taken off yet, but it took off anyway, even though he said stop, turn the planes around. But as of the time that he issued his order, it seems that one of them had maybe made it into international space. Okay. This is another absurd argument. I mean, I give the devil his due when they have an argument. They don't have an argument. This idea, let's assume they killed somebody over international waters. What do you think? Judge doesn't have power over crimes and torts because an American plane doing American business is over international waters? It's absurd. You turn the plane around and you land it. And you might wonder a couple of things about this. Number one, is this judge really a far left radical that Trump doesn't know, but he's appointed by Obama? This is an absolute lie from whole cloth. This judge was picked by George W. Bush, not making it up. The way it works in Washington, D.C. is that there are two federal court systems. One is the Superior Court, but the Superior Court of Washington, D.C. is picked by the president and approved by Congress, even though it's the local courts in Washington, D.C. That's one of the things that they don't have real home rule. So that's exactly what happens. This judge was picked by W, approved by the Senate, I think 96-0 or something like that, to sit on the Superior Court of Washington, D.C. Then he's such an excellent judge, so nonpartisan, that Obama picks him, again approved overwhelmingly, to sit on the U.S. District Court. And now with the passage of years, he's the chief judge. And you go through his background, Mark, it's such a farce to call him a radical. St. Albans, the elite school in Washington, D.C., Yale College, where he was the basketball star because he's 6'6" of the Yale team. Then he goes to Yale Law School. And then guess who he rubes with? Because I'm not making this up. Brett Kavanaugh. To call him a radical. He's also ruled for Trump in cases previously when Trump was around the first term. So this is completely out of whole cloth. This is disgraceful. And the idea that you would impeach somebody just so, your listeners and viewers are so learned on these things, but some people who may not be aware of this fact, you can appeal any judge. And that's what you do. You don't disobey or defy a federal judge. You appeal. So this kind of contumaciousness, this kind of contempt is punishable criminally and civilly. So now the last thing, Mark, is that the judge has stayed his hand, which is probably a very smart thing to do because it's become so controversial. At some point, you just say, the country doesn't need this constitutional crisis. So he has not demanded answers for another few days from the government, because the government is very reluctant to tell, the truth. They should almost give a Miranda warning. These lawyers for Trump should be given a Miranda warning, because when they turn over the flight logs, they're going to show that they were in contempt. And it's like, okay, who did you call? And what's going to actually happen when this all shakes out is one of those lawyers who was in court, they're not going to go to prison and lose their bar card. They're going to say, I called Deputy Assistant Attorney General so-and-so. I called this top official at DHS. And you know what he said to me? Don't turn the plane around. Screw it. What's the judge going to do? Land the plane, let the devil take the hindmost. And the last thing on it is you do wonder at the end of the day whether the Democrats want to die on this beach. Because at the end of this whole thing, most of these seem like pretty bad guys. It's going to be very hard to get them back out of El Salvador under the circumstances. And the whole political thing is fraught. But if they can keep the debate on the rule of law, the rule of law is an absolute winner that the Democrats are for, and the Republicans have sat there totally mum, all the hypocrites who yelled and screamed about Biden's executive orders.
I'm glad you touched on the politics, because I've mentioned before, and I'll just mention it now in the context of this conversation. It strikes me that this is a winner for the Republicans and for the right. This shows that, the Democrats care more about some legal detail than getting rid of these dangerous Venezuelans. That's the argument that Stephen Miller's making on. And you correctly point out timing, and you correctly point out all the details that are quite pertinent, of course. But the bottom line is the news cycle around this Venezuelan deportation will be won by the right, because it looks like the left, in this case represented by this judge who they vilified, in this ridiculous comical way, because as you say, he's not a lefty at all, appointed by George Bush. This judge is actually preventing Donald Trump, our Lord and Savior, and his people, and Holman more specifically, from deporting the most dangerous people who are in this country, this Venezuelan gang. That's the way it's going to be played out, and that's the way it's going to be digested by the American public. In other words, when you say you have to pick the hill you want to die on, yeah, this is a tough one, because I think the impression that is going to be left is different than the actual details legally,
What could break the Democrats' way is they didn't abide by due process. And so we don't even really know that these are all Venezuelan gang members. They're going to have relatives in Venezuela and in other countries who are going to come forward with things like, their high school graduation picture down in Caracas, or that they did some other wonderful thing and say, they got the wrong guy. This guy, maybe if he was running with Tren de Aragua at all, it was pretty much as their hostage or as someone that they intimidated. Next thing you know, he gets scooped up. They're living in an apartment where this guy's basically a captive, because he's found himself a Tren de Aragua pretty much captive in this apartment. And then they raid the whole place. And there's never been a hearing where somebody said, hey, wait a second, I can prove I was a captive in that apartment. Or there may be people, as there were when they deported the worst of the worst in that extremely expensive deportation flight. More than half of those people had no criminal record whatsoever. They'd never been arrested for anything. I imagine what's going to happen with these people is that few of them have a criminal record, because somebody had to have enough brains over there to say the ones that we could have normally deported, let's just normally deport them. Let's give them an expedited hearing. Let's put on the evidence that they have a criminal record. Those are so easy. Then there'd be no controversy. And very nice that this guy in El Salvador is willing to take those people down there for a price. That's also, it seems to me, a rather contentious issue, deporting people to a third country. I mean, you think about it. And the other thing that's all wrong with this, Mark, and I think this will resonate with the people and not just be a total negative for Democrats who push the rule of law point, is that this Alien Enemies Act, it's from 1798. I remember the first memo that I wrote on Wall Street, I cited a maritime case from 1799. And the partner said to me, how about something from the 19th century? And I said, well, the Constitution's from the 18th century. And he said to me, how about something a little bit more recent as precedent? And the reason that this has not been used recently as a precedent is it has to do with times of war. It's only been used 3 times in our history. All 3 were in times of war. War of 1812, World War I, World War II. Never been used since World War II. There's a very simple way to deport people who are found to be criminally, or either criminals or engaged in criminal activity. They're not citizens. There's a very easy way to deport them. And the fact that Trump and Homan chose not to go that route suggests to me that a lot of people on that flight were people that they couldn't have gone that route. These are people who were not otherwise deportable, or some judge might have said, there's no basis to deport you. That will come out. Now, whether it'll be given any attention or not, they'll say they're all a bunch of liars, all these people in Caracas with the high school pictures. Don't believe it. We got an informant who says such and such. They may have another guy like Curveball. Remember Curveball that knew all about Iraq? Well, they're going to have a guy who knows all about trade to Iraq with some curveball who's going to say, yeah, they're all crooks. Every one of them on the flight was a crook. But that probably is not going to be the fact if anybody bothers to check it out, Mark, when the facts start.
Well, one of the things they're looking at is the tattoos. And one of the tattoos that's on one of these guys is actually a clock with the time of his daughter's birth on the clock. Okay. So again, and he might still be a gang member. Okay. I'm not saying he's not, but I'm saying that apparently they could tell by various tattoos that people were members of this gang. Well, this just in, one of those tattoos got into the outfield on you, because that's not, what the, and the mother stepped forward and said, my son's not in this. That tattoo is actually a clock with his daughter's birth time. So again, as you say, the details will come out.
You can also get jumped into some of these gangs. I had somebody, and that was the evidence against him, that he had done all those things because he had the gang tattoos. He was affiliated with the gang people. And then lo and behold, it was in Ventura County, and they couldn't back up their charges. And the judge threw the case out throughout the grand jury indictment on my motion. So tattoos, and like I said, these people get jumped in before you know it. You get a gang tattoo, whether you want one or you don't want one, because guess what? They don't tend to take no for an answer when they want to do something to you. And you could just be like an affiliate. You could be someone hanging around with them. This is...
Let me get to, of course, that's so true, but let me get to the impeachment of the judge that was called for. I just have limited time with you, David Katz. I want to try to be economical about it. So the impeachment of a judge that, again, this judge that you have, detailed for us.
Chief Judge Boasberg.
Yeah, so he's been, now vilified because he, again, went against the Venezuelan deportation not being part of due process. But I wonder if you could speak to the John Roberts remarks, the idea they called upon, this guy in all the ways that they normally do, meaning Trump and Musk and high-profile GOP people, even Bondi, though, was the only one who said, I don't think we're looking at impeaching anyone, but even Bondi was kind of speaking the political speak around this judge's decision. But it was Roberts from the Supreme Court, the same guy in this concierge Supreme Court that Donald Trump has, that gave him the immunity, who said, hey, this is not cool. You've got to respect the rule of law here and respect the power and the appellate process when it comes to these judgeships.
I hope that's your expression, concierge Supreme Court, because that's terrific, Mark. I just want to say one thing, because it's Mark's Madness. It's March Madness. I see that Yale made it this year. let's again reflect for 1 second on this person who's supposed to be this lunatic, so out of step with America. He was the top basketball player on Yale's basketball team. He's someone who has done everything right in life, married with kids, had this distinguished career. This is such an outrage, again, for these Republican senators to stand by for this. This is no one who's even on the legal fringe. So Roberts, he did this about 6 years ago, and I was on with Laura Ingram's show at the time because he had just said right around Thanksgiving, I think it was 6 years ago, when Trump said, some Obama judge who's railroading me. And this may have been the one, the Hispanic judge with the Trump University, where he ended up paying $25 million, Trump did, for defrauding people, poor people who wanted to get ahead in life and had ponied up this money and got defrauded by Trump and Trump University. And Roberts came back then and said, we don't have Trump judges, Obama judges. We have a lot of really hardworking, serious judges who are trying to do the very best they can and call these cases right or wrong. All of a sudden, Laura Ingram's show and her guest wanted to impeach him. Now, this is when RBG was still around. I said, you guys have a 5-4 majority when the wind is blowing to the right, the way you want it blowing. And the reason you have 5-4 when the wind is blowing your way is because of Roberts. You really want to impeach this guy? And I was a controversial guest on Fox. It was 3-1. And I got to say, Roberts is one of the most respected people in America, which he was then, and he still is now. He had to go to bat on this one because what Trump said was so outrageous, so in violation of the rule of law. And you see that Trump hasn't really been tamped down very much. But I think on this particular issue, Mark, I think the Supreme Court is not going to go with Trump. I think that this Alien Enemies Act is only for time of war. I think that it cannot generally violate due process, because if the Supreme Court says, even 5-4, that the Alien Enemies Act, it can be used not in time of war, it can be used anytime like right now. Anyone who's not a U.S. citizen can be picked out without due process and say that there's an invasion. This invasion is a farce. The law says specifically in an invasion by a government. That's not something you have to read into it. It says invasion by a government. Tren de Aragua, you could look it up. I know there's now a Gulf of America, but there's no country called Tren de Aragua. They have not declared war or invaded us. If you can say any gang out there, any bunch of coyotes has invaded us, and so anybody who's supposedly part of that coyote network can be deported, boom, just like that, to some horror prison in Central America, as these people were. That would really freak people out. These aren't the only immigrants who've ever come to America. Think of all of our immigrant groups. That law has been around for 200 years. So Irish people they didn't like who were immigrants, Italian people, Jews they didn't like. All of them, before they became citizens of the United States, could have just been rounded up because they were supposedly part of La Cosa Nostra. They were supposedly part of some Jewish street gang, and deported, just stuck on a plane like that with no due process, with no determination that you really even were one of the people in that gang who shared the gang's illegal objectives. This can't be right. So they're going to lose in the Supreme Court, Mark. That's my confident Katz prediction.
I've got so much. I'm going to radically change gears here, and maybe I can double back to some of the other stuff. Just our time is so short. But I wanted to ask you about this Greenpeace. This is a pretty big judgment. It may eliminate Greenpeace. It's such a huge judgment. So Greenpeace has been found liable for millions in damages over the pipeline protests. This is the North Dakota pipeline. Everyone may remember it, the Dakota Access Oil Pipeline. It was a very high-profile protest at the time. And it was a jury trial that was brought by this Energy Transfer, it's called. It's a Dallas-based company. So this 9-person jury awarded Energy Transfer, this energy company out of Dallas, and its subsidiary, Dakota Access, more than $650 million in damages. Then that's levied against Greenpeace International, okay? Now, they're based in the Netherlands, and there's also a USA-based part of them as well, as I'm seeing. And they're calling them guilty of defamation, trespassing, nuisance, civil conspiracy, and other acts. And I'm sure they'll appeal, but it is an extraordinary judgment. As I say, it may literally end Greenpeace because it's such a huge judgment, $650 million. Can you speak to this?
Well, you know, we're now in the era of boycotting law firms, and government action against law firms I don't agree with. But certainly private boycotts of law firms, no one has to hire a particular law firm. The city of LA and the state of California don't have to hire any particular law firm as long as they do it in a legal way. LA's largest law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. This Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher is the one representing this energy company. Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher, which does all this business with the state of California, the city of LA, all of that, represent loads and loads of people here in Southern California, took on this case of this Dallas company against Greenpeace. And I think it's just terrible. You know, they tell recruits you ought to come to this huge national law firm, Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher. We're terrific. And then they take this piece of business. Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher needed the money so bad to take up this piece of business and cripple Greenpeace. So I think it's terrible. And to show my own partisan feelings, you know, I'm a contributor to Greenpeace, and I agree very much with the things that they've done. Now, supposedly, they helped instigate or train this use of free speech. And you might say, well, how come they don't have a SLAPP suit? Because here in California and in many other states, Mark, we have what we call a SLAPP, S-L-A-P-P suit. And it says, you know, you're trying to hurt me or financially ruin me as an individual or as a company because I'm exercising my First Amendment rights. So people are asking, well, why didn't they invoke this in North Dakota? And guess what? There is no SLAPP suit available to either Greenpeace or some of the other people that they sued there so that they could stop what Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher and this energy company were trying to do to them. So, and then on top of that, you know, I've actually been in North Dakota. They treated me just fine. My case went great. The judge was really nice to me in Fargo. Fargo was playing in the Fargo movie theater in downtown Fargo when I was in Fargo. And they didn't even let this case have its venue transferred to Fargo. It's in this smaller town where these demonstrations were held and where supposedly people were inconvenienced. So you have all these people from this community that was inconvenienced and that seemed to have a stake in this, put on the jury, and you'll be shocked, Mark, you're sitting down, right? And they returned this $600 million verdict, these jurors did. And you may say, well, hopefully that'll get thrown out. Well, good luck with the North Dakota appellate courts and good luck going to the US Supreme Court. The only thing that I can say about this is apparently Greenpeace, because it's an international company and they're over there in Europe, I think Europe is and they're countersuing in Europe. So I think Greenpeace is trying to sue the energy company. Maybe Gibson, Dunn and Crutcher can come to their defense over in Europe. I'm sure they have a European office. These enormous firms always do. But hopefully they will win against the energy company over there in Europe, where I think the Greenpeace International is trying to get some kind of remedy. But to me, it's just awful. I mean, it's a free speech right. This idea that this company was hurt $600 million worth, I don't buy it. I don't think it's in any kind of clear record. You'd think the appellate courts would do something about it. And the last thing that I want to say is that they not only had this jury where was all these local people who seemed like, I don't know, I mean, it seemed to me like they were pretty biased. Why not at least move the case to Fargo and get people who weren't right there in the local community? But on top of that, Mark, they apparently have been they've been kicking this thing around there in that North Dakota court, and that's what just happened. It's terrible, a terrible loss for Greenpeace, and they were not, as I understand it, they didn't instigate. They weren't the impetus behind this. This was the standing something. Native Americans.
It was Native Americans because it affected Native American land and Native American water. Yeah, exactly. Access to this water. And I just, and I know I'm a tree hugger and the environment's very important to me. And so this really cuts deep. I feel it's very hard to go up against these companies anyway. They have a lot of lawyers like the distinguished David Katz who are working, in a way that makes it hard to defeat them. And I think of Stephen Donziger. You know, Stephen Donziger was a brilliant lawyer and is a brilliant lawyer who won a record, I want to say it was $9.5 billion in Ecuador against Chevron. And they polluted, Chevron did. I mean, absolutely polluted an entire area. And Donziger went down there and actually did the heavy lifting associated with this case and won. And then Chevron went after him personally and ultimately prevailed in ruining his life. I mean, on what, and we should have him on the show. I mean, he's still around. And here's Calvin Wong, saying Chevron screwed over Donziger on a phony charge and he lost his law license. Yeah, that's exactly right. So taking on these companies has its own cost. That's a lawyer, Donziger, who beat them. He beat Chevron. He got a judgment against them. And then ultimately they beat him. It was like, okay, we'll show you. We're going to ruin your life. And they did.
No, that's a really sad story. And I hope that you do explore it. And we have to also give a shout out for a lot of lawyers like the ones who are taking on the Trump administration right now. I mean, to have the whole law firm blackballed. You know, I just think it's a terrible thing. Just speaking from my own firm, Mark, we've never taken a case where there was an alleged environmental crime. I know a lot of white collar firms. I know about white collar, sort of sludge and pollution and destroying the shoreline and water quality. We've never taken on a case like that. I don't disparage people who decide that that's what's in their economic future. A lot of the so-called white collar firms, that's a great piece of business for them. It's never been a piece of business that I'm going to take.
And I have to say, you know, everybody I believe needs an advocate, and we have a system of advocacy, so I'm good with it. But I just see how sad the outcome can often be. And just because you're on it, lawyers at some of the nation's largest law firms are afraid of President Donald Trump. This from Politico. Not just afraid of what his policies might mean for their clients, but now for their own livelihoods, as his attacks on individual firms have left a shocked industry struggling to respond. When Trump first took office in 2017, attorneys at big law firms lent thousands of pro bono hours to legal efforts to stymie the administration's most controversial policies, like the travel ban, restricted entry to the U.S. from certain Muslim-majority countries, and a lot of lawyers donated their time to this effort. So when there were the efforts to overturn the 2020 election and the Capitol riot, Trump became even more of an outcast when it came to the mainstream legal community. But now, as he returns, they suggest in this Politico piece, David Katz, that Trump finds a Washington legal community that is facing a dilemma: keep their heads down and avoid cases that may pit them against the administration, or continuing to represent clients that might anger a president that is increasingly willing to use his power to seek vengeance. Can you speak to this?
Well, yes. I mean, if you're like that firm we talked about the other day, Perkins Coie, and, you know, you've represented Boeing and you've had all these huge clients, and then, you know, you had some lawyer there that Hillary Clinton thought was wonderful, and so you become Hillary Clinton's lawyer, and then somehow Trump tries to take revenge against the whole law firm. And there's, I think I had the number the other day, I think it's over 1,200 lawyers there. They're a big company. And you can see where 1,170 lawyers are thinking, how can this be happening to me? I'm going to not have a security clearance. I'm going to try to have a meeting with the IRS, and I won't be allowed into the IRS building because it's a federal building. And Trump's view of the unitary executive is that he can bar me from walking into an IRS building because it's part of Trump's unitary executive real estate. So obviously this is totally unfair. And you see, the thing is, it can't come around again. When the Democrats get power again, which I think they will quite promptly in both houses of Congress and then in the presidency in a couple of years, it can't come around. The Republicans can't be paid in their own coin. We will never bar law firms the way they just barred Democratic law firms. There are some famous right-wing law firms, and it's the rule of law. It's just not right. And so there's not like mutually assured destruction because the Democrats and people of principle will not do that to the right-wing law firms the way that they are now what's Trump's favorite word? Colluding and conspiring to do these things to liberal, so-called liberal law firms like Perkins Coie. And, to call Perkins Coie or Covington and Burling, the huge Washington, D.C. firm, liberal law firms is such a farce. You have people running around. They're great lawyers. That's how they got to where they are. But these folks are making $4 or $5 million a year, Mark. $4 or $5 million a year each. The top partners at these firms, or even more. They're charging $2,000 an hour. When I first made $200 an hour, my grandmother said to me, "David, what do you do for that kind of money?" So I'm sure their grandmothers are asking them, "What do you do for $2,000 an hour? What do you do for that kind of money?" At Covington and Burling and at Perkins Coie. But if you represent Boeing, you represent these big cases. And so that is a real economic lifeline that's being turned off for, they are millionaire partners at these big law firms, but they want to attract other great lawyers, Mark. And so the way they do that, they go to the law students who are graduating at the top of their class and they say to them, "Come work for our law firm." And they don't normally say, "We represent Musk and we're rolling in money." You'll be able to tell your friends you make even more money than they do because they may represent the cigarette manufacturers, but we represent Musk. They tend not to recruit the top legal graduates with that, but they tell them what great work they do and how they're helping society and so forth. And so they want to have a practice where they are indeed doing pro bono work and helping society. Mark, before we get off the air, and I know you don't have that much time, but can we just talk about the $50 million Starbucks case?
Yeah, definitely. And I'll get to that Godel loophole. I don't know who put that up there, but thank you. But it's we'll get to it in a second. Won't take long to do Godel's loophole. All right. So David Katz, please. Starbucks, huge judgment against Starbucks for serving, I guess it was tea that spilled and it was so hot. This is like a callback. Didn't McDonald's do this dance, a while ago?
There was the famous case against McDonald's, reviled and ridiculed by right-wing media everywhere, that, oh my God, the plaintiff's lawyers, they're crazy. You can sue anybody for anything. This lady had really hot coffee and she sued for, I think it was $3 million, back when money was money. And so ultimately, she not only won, but then they settled the case for something less than that. I think, if my facts are right, about $500,000, but she won a larger judgment than that because people appeal. The loser, the company, appeals a case like that and says that this is a violation of the 8th Amendment. It's an excessive fine that's being imposed on me, whether federal court or state court. The Constitution is against excessive fines and that level of punitive damages or that level of award. And you think to yourself, okay, am I going to go all the way through the appellate courts and hold on to my $3 million award if you're the lady with the hot coffee? You think, you know what? There's an amount at which I'll settle. And so they end up settling for the amount of the award. But you got to win the award first, usually, before the other side is willing to settle. So that was the famous hot coffee case. The lady was severely burned. And the coffee, I think you're supposed to drink coffee at 130 degrees or something. And that coffee was heated up to 180 degrees. So it was excessively hot coffee. She was very much injured and scolded. Now, this person ordered a couple of large hot teas, and they were all put in a tray. And then one of them supposedly wasn't fastened properly. And I think the camera showed that. So that was really bad for Starbucks that, the plaintiff had that evidence. And the plaintiff was terribly injured. The coffee tray fell in his lap. He had great harm to his groin, to his genitalia. He had a dysfunction on account of that. I mean, he's entitled to some significant damages, no doubt about it. But whether it's $50 million, that's what, of course, has really caught people's eye, that it just seems like an excessive amount. I think probably what's going to happen is that they'll make a motion to the judge saying it's excessive, trim it down. I think the judge will probably cut it down, and then they'll probably appeal anyway and said even the reduced amount is excessive and it's just too high an award. But it's gotten a lot of talk here in LA. I was just getting coffee the other day, and the barista says to the person next to me, "I put this on tight. Don't worry. I put it on really tight." But people are talking about that case, and then somebody up there says, "I wish I got $50 million. Well, no, not if you had what happened to this guy. The reality of these torts, when you're really injured, people would rather never have the injury than have the money.
Then when you see a judgment like that, right, David Katz, that means there was real damage done, and you do not want that, even for the money. No, it's a real nasty.
And he had to medically prove it. They apparently offered him $3 million at some point, and then as the case, I guess it became clearer and clearer that the plaintiff was going to win, they offered even more money. You can't bring that in front of the jury. You can't say, give my clients $50 million. After all, they offered him $5 million, and they lowballed him. You can't bring that in. That's the.
That's interesting. You cannot. Okay, you can't reference. Look, they've already kind of tried to tap out on this. Yeah.
Right. So and then there's confidentiality because otherwise people would never try to settle cases, Mark.
I promised that we'd get to it, so let me get to it. Dennis writes, what does Katsadamas think about Goodell's loophole? Goodell claimed the U.S. could become a dictatorship via the Constitution. Yeah, this is this theory that you can. I think he was trying to get his own citizenship, or I don't know what was the design. It was maybe you can fill me in. This is a loophole in the Constitution. He feels, or I guess this Goodell guy felt, that would allow the U.S. to become a constitutional dictatorship. Can you speak to it at all?
I'm not really familiar with that theory, but I mean, people have pointed out that, Hitler won office.
Sure.
I think Mussolini won his first office. Certainly Chavez down in Venezuela, he actually won. This guy Maduro doesn't seem to ever think the election is going to go his way, and he seems to steal them. But Chavez, Mussolini, and Hitler were popular and won. And then, of course, they never had a really fair election after that, because once they were in there, just like the communists, they didn't want to have a fair election where they might be voted out. So, I mean, how are ways that we could have just voted in Trump and lose our rights? Well, he could decide that whether there's a constitutional amendment or not, which he could never get. He's running another time, and he's going to sit there and wait for the Supreme Court to disqualify him. And maybe it'll go state by state, and they'll say the same thing they said in the Colorado case, that one state can't disqualify anybody, and Colorado can't, and New York can't. And before you know it, he's won another term because he's never disqualified, and he's popular at that time. It's also, we could lose our democracy because they could stuff the ballot boxes, which of course people are terribly scared about. He seems to have won. I know you've had guests on that say that no, there really is some doubt about that. But he seems to have won the last time, but he might not win the next time, and have his people stop the vote in different places, disqualify so many people that there weren't fair votes. I don't think that we're going to lose our democracy because the courts will stop doing what they do. I mean, I think the courts have really done well. There's that case, my old friend up in the Bay Area, William Alsup, who voted that you have to he ruled that you have to reinstate all of those people who were wrongly fired. So I think they'll be reinstated. And then, in terms of having all these thugs everywhere, people were so worried after Trump gave all those pardons to people who were dangerous that he had his own little stormtroopers, his own little brown shirts out there. But I think that's going to come to naught because they have to go do brown shirt things in states, and the states are going to watch them. Even if the feds are completely asleep at the wheel, even if Kash Patel, turns a blind eye to things that the FBI ought to be investigating and preventing from happening, the states won't. So you got California, New York, Maryland, and all that kind of stuff. If these guys try to do this kind of stuff, I think that, and that was the feature. People said, okay, when Trump's coming to power now, how is it different? He's got both houses of Congress. Said, how is it different? I'm not trying to be dramatic, but how is it different from when like Hitler or Mussolini came to power? And the one thing that they had in both of those countries, Mark, were federal police forces. And so Mussolini and Hitler could really, have the federal law enforcement on their side, and it really supplanted the states. The state didn't have much power. And so I've said this for a long time. We need to up our game in all of these states. We need to, people are fired from the FBI because they worked on the January 6th investigation. They ought to be hired by states like California and New York. We ought to have a Bureau of Investigation in New York and in California, other states like that, that really rival the FBI. And that if there is, conspiracies, if these people start to become brown shirts, that in a legal way, their communications are known and their efforts are thwarted. We haven't had the thing where people like you just attacked in the streets. That became a feature of Nazism, where Jews and other people were just attacked in the streets. and there was impunity. And then there was Kristallnacht in 38, where stores were rampaged and vandalized, and they just sat there. Your business rival, who was Gentile, would say, "Oh, isn't that terrible?" Mr. Cohn, Mr. Katz.
You still have that. You still have that in Europe, and some would say even in this country at times, where their response times, for example, on bombings and this kind of thing, can vary based on where the bombing happened, where the crime happened, et cetera.
But the states, Mark, the states can prevent that. California has an ability to monitor everything that happens in California in a way that, I don't know, take some famous state, Saxony didn't have that ability to stand up to Hitler and Hitler's federal forces that were everywhere. California is a lot stronger in California than the Saxony police were in Saxony. And I think that's what's going to keep America very safe, that you can get in a world of trouble in all these states. And, that's why we have to have state prosecutions, too, because obviously people are really worried that between the almost absolute immunity that the president has and the pardon power, that he can have his minions really be brown shirts. But he can't give state pardons, and he can't stop the state of California, New York, Maryland from spending a lot of money making sure that we are crime-free in the sense of not having brown shirts, not having assaults on people because of their sex identification or because of their race, religion, ethnic group in the streets. And that I think is, we're not going to have, I still think the Republicans are going to get voted out. You watch, year and a half.
All right. You always leave us with something optimistic. I appreciate that. David, thank you. And we love that you're so generous with your time on Thursdays. And we are overdue for a face-to-face. So I will follow up and we will get that organized and on the calendar. All right?
Bring Kim and Albert, too. We'll get the whole.
I would love it. That might be a little.
We got to go to the deli in Studio City. We'll get the whole gang. Come on.
The logistics of that might be more complicated, but we'll do.
When you're way to Disneyland, Kim, tell us when you're going to Disneyland, and we'll all rendezvous.
Yeah, David Katz ready for a Disneyland rendezvous. On your way, Kim. All right, David Katz, everybody. Thanks, David. All right. Wow.
The Mark Thompson Show.
Yeah,
That's fun. Little Disneyland, little David Katz.
Yeah, that'd be
what
cool.
A vacation.
Ashley, thank you for the super sticker. Wow. $50. Are you kidding?
Big shout out.
Shout out to you. Thank you so much, Ashley. Still one of the coolest names of all of our viewers.
You look like a guy who's going to cry.
I'm in cry territory. I'll be honest.
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
Yeah.
Not going to, but
I'm not going to cry. I'm not going to cry.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate that. This from Luis, a $5 super chat. Education, 2 states. Be best for you all. Okay, a lot of this stuff I have to read ahead of time, and it's tough with a cold read.
It's like a Melania. It's like a Melania read.
You
have to do it with the accent. Education, 2 states. Be best for you all. Right? Speak pretty like me. You buy mine, book mine. Love Melania.
That is a great performance. Kim, why don't you do more of that? You should read these super chats. That was really great. Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Louise.
I'll keep my day job.
Here's a $5 super sticker from Wes, who is one of our OGs. Big shout out. Thank you for the super sticker. Yeah. And a super sticker from my favorite McAllister, Lucy McAllister. I love my Lucy McAllister. $10 super sticker. They called him Sleepy Joe because we could sleep at night. Jim Slayton writes that in a $5 super chat. Thank you, Jim. Yeah. These are troubling times for sure. These are troubling times. All we have is our faith in the system. David Katz always renews my faith.
He gives you hope, doesn't he?
He really does.
Mm-hmm.
Albert, I know we need to wrap up, and we are going to wrap up. But I thought we would quickly check in on the situation with March Madness.
I can't believe it.
Albert, update us. We have a pretty good one going in the second hour. We had
My wife wants some vegetables for crudité.
The crudité was going up against a fan favorite.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Yeah, Larry King's scene. Albert, now, as the commissioner, can you update us on both hours, AOC versus Internet and wife crudité versus Larry King Scene? I turn it over to you, sir.
It's fairly one-sided for a couple of these that are participating. Larry King Scene and AOC Baby Girl running away today.
Wow, it looks as though the scene.
What can you tell us about the scene?
Looks like you're going to be running away with it, Larry.
Oh, girl, baby girl. Don't even play.
Wow. Yeah. Man. Well, that's it. Tomorrow, give me a glimpse, Albert. I have surgery today on my hand.
Oh, good wishes.
I'm going to have this big glove thing, I think, so I'm not going to be able to be here. I can't work any of my stuff.
You should come on just to show us the big glove.
Maybe I will. Maybe I will.
Like.
You know,
yeah.
I don't know. I'm hoping for some. I'm not a pain med guy, but please, doctor, give me something so I don't have to. I guess it's pretty uncomfortable. But anyway, tomorrow we have Mark's Madness already baked. Like we did a special recorded version, so I will join you for that. And I may join you for the to show you my my big bandaged hand. But anyway, what I'm asking is what goes off against what tomorrow, Albert, please?
Tomorrow we have Nothing in Our History going against Coffee Down.
Oh yeah, put that coffee down.
Put that coffee down.
We also have one of my favorites going back to Texas, going against Casey Kasem Hall.
Oh my!
Y'all can all go to hell, and I'm going back to Texas.
Wow, that's going up against Casey. Oh my gosh, that's the.
This is Casey Kasem in Hollywood.
This is Casey in Hollywood, and I'm going up against that crazy lady from Texas tomorrow.
Wow, that'll be great. I'm looking forward to it. I love Mark's Madness. It's really the one thing we've kept from the old show, and I really enjoy it, and I think the audience does. And I love Albert in the act, as commissioner. Really, quite impressive. Well, I think we've learned a lot about each other today. I really do. Yeah, we've learned that we've had hopes and dreams, and some of those hopes and dreams may happen. Some of those hopes and dreams may take longer to happen. But we're all walking in the same direction. Yeah. Thanks to John Aravosis for stopping through. He's our latest new guest. He will be back again. I guess our first date went well. He contacted us and said, hey, it was fun. Happy to do it again. So that's always good news. Yeah. Love when a good guest will be returning. And, of course, the brilliant David Katz, the counselor weighing in on so much. Coachella Valley Coffee is the official coffee of this show, and you can get 10% off at CoachellaValleyCoffee.com when you use the code MARKT at checkout, so coffee, tea, or whatever. And now, Shadow.
I'm Shadow Stevens for the Mark Thompson Show. Bye-bye.
I love my Shadow Stevens. He sounds good. And now,
Out of time. Bye-bye.
We're out of time, ladies and gentlemen. The After Party with Kim over on the After Party Live channel. Until tomorrow, bye-bye.